This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Today we're going to be talking about 5 photo books that changed my perspective on photography and forever altered my brain chemistry. Now, if you are a photographer that has never picked up a photo book, I highly recommend you do so. Photo books are great, not only for, being inspired and being able to see different work from different artists, but beyond that, you're also able to see what exactly the world looks like to other photographers. So like I said earlier, I have 5 books that I want to talk about today. 4 of them are photo books, and one of them is an interview and conversation book, which includes a ton of compiled interviews from one of the godfathers of street photography. And as an added bonus, at the very end of this episode, I am going to show you guys the book that honestly had the biggest impact in my own photography personally. I mean, I've learned so much just from reading and looking at the photographs in that book, and I want to share that with you guys today. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Alright, so funny enough, the first book on this list here, I don't actually have present with me. It's on loan to a friend right now. But the book that I want to start this off with is the exception. It's the only book that does not have any photos in it. And this book is called Interviews and Conversations from none other than the famous French photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson. Now, if you've never heard of If you've never heard of HCB before, you're probably not familiar with the term street photography. Now, a lot of people will argue Bresson was quote unquote the godfather of street photography, but the one thing we can't deny is that Bresson walked so that we could run. As photographers, he almost crafted a genre of photography that circled around photojournalism, but took a very nice artistic twist to it and added in his background from painting and drawing into his compositions. And this book, called Interviews and Conversations, essentially compiles a ton of different interviews he has done from different media sources, from like sit-down interviews, TV interviews, all of that. And he has so much valuable insight when it comes to photography and how he approaches it. For example, some of the things he said in the book, one of them being his famous quote, "Your first 10,000 photographs are your worst." He would talk about finding elements in the field and using them as compositional tools to help get his message or story across. And if you are looking for what I would consider kind of like a foolproof manual on how to approach street photography, of course in the style of Bresson, Interviews and Conversations is a very good read. And a lot of what I read in that book, even though I've read it like front to back maybe 20 to 30 times, it still resonates with everything that I deal with when it comes to photography. Now, thankfully, the second book I actually have in person, so I'm going to be able to show you guys and talk about it. The second book that I have here is called Early Color from Saul Leiter. Now, I don't know much about Saul Leiter's personal background, but I am a fan of his work. And for the first maybe 3 years that I've ever heard of Saul Leiter's name, I've only ever seen his black and white. It wasn't until recently I found this book in a half-price bookstore and I picked it up, and oh my goodness, you guys, this has changed my perspective on photography immensely. Saul Leiter's work revolves a lot around using kind of colors and textures to be able to portray a story or some sort of timeline. Now, in his color photographs, there are a lot of elements within it that remind you of a black and white photo. Like, for example, utilizing a ton of shadow here on top, almost as a subframe to help kind of show what's inside of that little frame inside there, which of course is a cute little dog. It's almost as if he approached his color work with a black and white mindset, which a lot of people don't really do. Here's another good example of what I mean by colors and textures. You can see all of the nice little barber, swirlies. I don't know what those are called, but it ages the photo really well. A 75-cent haircut adds to the timelessness of the photo. You can tell exactly what era this is from, as well as just the hairstyle on the gentleman subject in the frame here. Like this one right here, I could definitely picture this as a black and white photo. And after looking at this book for quite some time, I realized that you can make a photograph absolutely anywhere in the world, as long as you have a good understanding of how to use your colors and how to use complementary textures to help evoke emotion. And you see that a lot in Saul Leiter's photography. He was a master at what he did, and I absolutely eat his stuff up because it's so different than what most people would consider street photography today. Now, the next 3 books have had the most impact on my own photography for various different reasons. And I'm gonna share that with you guys here in a second. But before we get into that, I wanna give a huge thank you and shout out to our sponsor for this episode, the good folks over at Squarespace. Squarespace is your all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. In order to elevate your photography to the next level, you're going to need your own professional website. Luckily, Squarespace is here to help you out. They have award-winning templates that you can use to get started within minutes. With a drag and drop template process, you can simply select pages like an e-commerce shop, a portfolio, and even a gallery to be able to display things like street photography. But perhaps one of my newest favorite features that I'm going to start implementing here soon is the appointment scheduling tab. This allows clients to see what time slots you have available for them to book you directly through your website, making the process super simple with no more back and forth hassle through emails. This is a complete game changer for photographers in 2024, and I highly recommend you guys get started with Squarespace today. Head over to squarespace.com/KingJapes and enter promo code KingJapes at checkout, and you guys can get 10% off of your first purchase of a domain or a website. Huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's episode. Okay, so the next book that I have here in front of me is one that I'm excited to share with you because a lot of the technique and compositional, kind of rules that he uses in his photography are things that I am practicing currently. And in a lot of ways, he is one of my GOATs. I just wish that more people can get their eyes on this book because it is amazing. The next book that we are going to be talking about is called The Suffering of Light from a photographer named Alex Webb. And Alex Webb, documented a lot of Cuba, a lot of other countries, during really, really important times in history. And so you're gonna see a lot of photographs in this book. And one thing that I want you to pay attention to as we go through is his use of layering. Now, layering in photography is extremely, extremely difficult. Not only are you going to try to tell a story here on one side of the frame, but you're also going to be telling the story of another person and then another person. And depending on the location and where you're at, you still need to make sure they all kind of mend together and tell one story. And Alex Webb was an absolute master at that. And that is something that today I am trying to implement into my photography. Let me show you. Okay, this right here, this is just the opening page. I want you guys to take a look at this image. So first and foremost, beautiful, beautiful foreground, nice little yellow. I don't know if those are dandelions or what, but they're in a field. This looks like a scene straight out of a movie. But not only do you have, kind of this entire thing going on here where there's someone getting arrested, you have people wearing a suit in the middle of a field, but you have these subjects here at the front. Next, you're gonna have this individual subject here kind of towards the middle, and he's kind of doing his own thing. And then you have a helicopter on top. And this is what I mean by the use of layering. Alex Webb was a master at this, and I'm gonna show you a couple more images that kind of represent what I'm talking about. Really quick, you guys, I wanna show you some of the slide film kind of looks that he had. I try to base a lot of what my new work looks like to kind of match that slide film look. I believe he shot a lot of Kodachrome, so unfortunately we don't have that anymore, but this is what I mean by layering. Look at all of the different layers, right? If you were to kind of crop out every other person in the frame except for the one or two that are interacting with each other, that could be its own photo in itself. This made me realize that I shouldn't just focus on the singular subject anymore. I have to think about how the environment is kind of dancing with him or her or they. And in a lot of ways, he got really close to his subjects. I mean, I'm talking this person right here, cigarette is literally in front of the lens. I'm sure he shot with a 28 or 35 millimeter, and you can just see the amount of detail in his photography. This is what I strive for, and in my opinion, Alex Webb is and will always be one of the GOATs of street photography. Check it out, you guys, The Suffering of Light from Alex Webb. I'm also gonna be leaving all of the books in the description below where you guys can pick them up. They are Amazon affiliate links, so if you purchase it through that link, I will be getting a small portion of that, and that just helps support the channel and all of the content that I make. So with Alex Webb and The Suffering of Light, I learned how to compose with layers. But when it really comes down to utilizing your environment and kind of incorporating that as compositional elements, there is no better photographer, in my opinion, than Bresson. So one book that I picked up that really altered my brain chemistry is The Decisive Moment by Henri Cartier-Bresson. Now, funny enough, I got this book a couple of years back, I believe in 2020, and they had like a reprint of it. And at that time, I paid like $100 for it. You guys, this book is like $1,000 right now. I don't know why, but actually I do know why. This is one of the most powerful monographs ever created. I mean, just look at this beauty, right? Look at that thing. Whew. But let me show you a couple of photographs from Bresson, all right? So as I said earlier, Bresson was a master at utilizing his environment to, be able to compose. And as a result, a lot of people called him the godfather of street photography. Now, I believe he was also documenting war and whatnot. He took basically what was in front of him and applied his skills from like painting and drawing and, approach photography in the same way. He talks a lot about how he sees the frame as a canvas and that a camera is just a way for you to get an instant sketch. And you see a lot of that in his frames, right? There's a lot of really nice geometry that he uses. So in this particular photo, there are a ton of leading lines. First and foremost is the rocket going up towards the individual. The fact that, he is exposing mostly for the highlights so that the subject here is kind of in a shadow. Like, look at this. This is genius. Using that line here to kind of help drag your eye through the frame. And as you kind of use it, you're starting to see all of these different subjects within your frame. I for sure know that when I see this, I think of Bresson. It's absolutely insane, you guys. And if you aren't familiar with Bresson's work, I'm sure you have seen one of his images before if you've looked up the term street photography. Man, this book absolutely changed the way I look at the world. The way I see the world now, honestly, is a bunch of shapes and lines. Shout out to Bresson for making me a complete freak. All right, so the last book on this list is probably the most influential to my own personal photography. And the reason why I say this is simply because it's from my favorite photographer, Gary Winogrand. Now, Gary Winogrand, oh my goodness, I don't know how I could explain his work in, such a short little segment here, but if you take the word chaos and then put organized in front of it, at least in my view, everyone's view on his work is different, but the way I see it is organized chaos. And the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of compositional rules that he will break. The biggest one that everyone complains about is the perfect horizon. He doesn't take photos like this. He often tilts his camera just a little bit and giving a little bit of Dutch tilt. It's gorgeous. Let me just get into it. All right, this is good because I still have the price tag on it. So I paid $22.49 at half price books for this. This is The Man in the Crowd, The Uneasy Streets of Gary Winogrand. Now, Winogrand shot mostly in black and white, but he had a ton of undeveloped color rules that are starting to come out now. Which is pretty cool because they just came out with a new book. I believe it's like Gary Winogrand Color, something like that. But this is what I mean by organized chaos. I don't want to talk too much about what I think. I want you guys to just view the images and let the book speak for itself. And Gary was a very controversial person, just at least from what I've been able to gather. He photographed a lot in New York, and some of his subject choices were a little bit, let's just say, promiscuous. I'm just gonna say that. But one thing that Gary did that I absolutely appreciate and love is his use of juxtaposition and, again, breaking compositional barriers. So, for example, in this photograph here, there's a lot of juxtaposition going on. You have this character kind of pulling something heavy. Look at the way he's dressed, right? It's such a contrast to the businessmen who are in the background laughing. This person is struggling to pull something, and these people are in the background laughing and kind of having the time of their lives in their pretty little suits. Really, really powerful stuff. And this is the type of photography that honestly struck me deep, deep, deep within my soul, because he's able to kind of look at the world, put his artistic spin on it, and kind of tell a story. And I think there is a huge difference between reality versus what we consider our personal truths. And personal truths are what we believe through our own eyes. And I believe he documented the world completely in his own way. And that in itself is such a powerful thing. Beautiful leading line. You could tell the frame is still tilted slightly, could have potentially been an amputee. And I think one of the beautiful things about Winogrand's work is the time in which he photographed. He, photographed in a time where people dressed a certain way, looked a certain way. There was social tension, social issues. And he, kind of took away his bias from the world and just documented. And we're able to take all of this in and appreciate that 40, 50 years later. Again, another use of beautiful juxtaposition in the height difference of the Three Stooges right here versus, the lovely couple here on the right side. So that is The Man in the Crowd by none other than Gary Winogrand. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Let me know in the comment section down below which books you guys recommend, or if you have read or seen any of these photo books. I'd love to hear you guys' input. We drop new videos every single week on this channel on street photography, film photography, and Fujifilm content in particular. And so if you guys are attuned to that, definitely hit that subscribe button down below. But that's gonna wrap it up for me. I'll see you guys in the next episode. As always, Minolta Gang.